Previously, we configured this port with a static MAC address. The disadvantage with that method is that you have to manually configure every MAC address that you want to add to your system. So if you had a 48 port switch and you wanted to permit 2 MAC addresses per port, that's already 96 MAC addresses that you need to configure. So that's a lot of work. On this port, gigabit 00, we simply enabled port security, but the problem with that method is when the switch reboots, or the port goes down and then comes up again, a new MAC address can simply be learnt. So if we want to limit that port to specific MAC addresses and add those MAC addresses to the configuration automatically, we can use the command switchport port security MAC address. And now, rather than manually configuring the MAC address, we can use the option sticky to configure a dynamic secure MAC address as sticky. Now, to put that in plain English, that essentially adds the MAC address to the running configuration of the switch. So when the MAC address is discovered, we typed this command, but notice this command was automatically added to the configuration. That MAC address wasn't there previously. We only typed those 2 commands, but now when we added this command, the MAC address was automatically added to the configuration. The advantage with that is that when we save the configuration, so notice when we go to the startup config, at the moment, no MAC address has been added to the startup config. But as soon as we save the configuration and then look at the startup config, that MAC address is added. So show startup config, MAC address has been added. So the advantage of that is, once again, if you have a 48 port switch and you want to add a MAC address per port, you don't have to configure 48 MAC addresses statically, or if you want to allow 2 MAC addresses per port, you don't have to configure 96 MAC addresses. You can simply use the sticky option and allow the switch to learn the MAC addresses, and then you save your config. Just remember, you need to make sure that the MAC addresses learnt initially are the correct MAC addresses. The idea is that you initially control which devices access the network, and hence which MAC addresses are learnt. So the advantage of sticky, once again, is that you don't have to manually type all the MAC addresses in.